guys. So I have to do an intro for today's episode because this is a podcast interview that is like 6 years in the making, truly. This is one of my, since I started my podcast, this has been a dream guest of mine to interview. And what I think is so incredible and full circle about this experience for me is that when I started my podcast, this felt like a pipe dream. Like it felt like there was no way that this could ever happen. And it happened. I got to interview Tony Robbins. And Tony, if you're not familiar, is really the godfather of modern day personal development. Personal development has gone back, forever, to Earl Nightingale and, positive thinking tapes on, not even on tape, on old records. So it's something that has existed for a really long time, but kind of the way it's practiced today, the idea of going to a conference and immersing yourself or reading certain books or working on mindset, this industry is really in a lot of ways built around him and his success. And whether you know him or don't, whether you like him or don't, he as a sort of figure has played a huge role in my life and the work that I do. You maybe have heard me talk about this, but about 6 years ago, I went to UPW, which is one of Tony's conferences. UPW stands for Unleash the Power Within. So it's I want to say maybe 4 days, and I took my team from work and we drove to San Jose from Los Angeles, and we rented an Airbnb and we all went to this personal development conference. And I can tell you without question, there were 5 of us there. And each of us have very different personality types, and every single person was changed for the better by that experience. Every single person got something different out of it. Jack, who you guys may know, he's my producer and longtime collaborator. Jack had this dream to own a van and sort of trick out the inside and make it like a small home. And I remember that was his big takeaway from UPW. I was over there I want to have a media company, and I want to be ambitious and do these things. And I want to have a conference, and I want to teach women because I think that it's different. I think personal development shows up differently for us. And I want to create content for women that serves them and loves them. Jack decided to fit out the interior of a Sprinter van, and I decided to start Rise Conference. But we all got something out of the experience, and so many good things came out of it. And honestly, it was a dream forever to get to sit down with him. I have opened up for him twice, meaning I was the keynote that went on stage before him. But in both of those experiences, I never got to meet him. And I always just feel like things will happen when they're supposed to, and things will happen when the timing is right. And even this time when they said, hey, we'd love to have you sit down with Tony, and we were planning it, and everyone was like, aren't you excited? How are you feeling? And I just kept thinking, until I'm actually sitting with him, I'm not going to believe that it's happening, because I'd just been dreaming about it for so long. It had been in my Start Today journal for so long. I had been writing it down for so long that I just was holding it very loosely. And I do think that that's a really powerful way to approach any big goals that you have in your life. Is I stay very focused on them, but I hold them loosely. I just believe that God is going to deliver those things. The universe is going to deliver those things when it's meant to happen. And I'm so happy with how it happened, because if I had gotten to meet him 5 years ago or 3 years ago or even 2 years ago, I don't think it would have been the experience that it was. I don't think, I just kept saying to myself and my boyfriend, because he was like, oh, are you like freaking out? And I just kept saying, I just want to be present in my body. That was my goal when I met Oprah. Like when I meet people that I admire so much, I just don't want to be so excited or so freaked out that I don't feel any of it and I'm not present. So I just kept thinking like, I want to be present in this experience. And if I let myself get too excited, I'm not going to be able to do that. So, it was, I flew into Miami from Austin to go sit down with him. And, you know, I'm taking care of my babies and I don't want to be gone a second longer than I need to. So I flew in that morning, was meant to interview him in the afternoon, stayed one night, and then flew home the next day. But the interesting thing about flying out in the morning, I took a 7 a.m. flight. I wasn't interviewing him till 2:30, plenty of time. And I took a shower, but I didn't put makeup on, and I was wearing sweatpants. I didn't do my hair, nothing. I just jumped on a plane, and fully intending that when I got there, I would, get cute, put on this cute outfit I had planned, do my hair, do my makeup. And I got to the hotel and my room wasn't ready. And I still had a couple of hours until I needed to leave. So I'm like, it's fine. That'll be ready. And just the minutes keep ticking by and it gets closer and closer. And I realize at some point, oh my gosh, I'm about to go do this interview. He's on a press tour. He's interviewing with all these people. I'm about to go to this interview. I'm about to go to his home. And I have not brushed my hair today. I'm not going to be able to put on makeup. I'm not going to be able to put on a cute outfit. And I just was so at peace with the whole thing. It made me really proud because I thought if this had happened a couple of years ago, I would have freaked out. I would have thought that I needed to show up in a certain way in order to earn my right to sit in that room. Does that make sense? I had to really get out of that mentality or that way of thinking and have been really intentional. Maybe you guys see this if you watch the podcast on YouTube, is I'm really intentional. Sometimes I'm wearing makeup and sometimes I look cute. And sometimes right now, I didn't brush my hair. It is what it is. Because I'm really trying to emphasize for myself as a woman that my intelligence, my ability to be a good podcast host, my ability to write well, to communicate with you, to create great content has absolutely nothing to do with the way that I look. For a very long time, I thought I had to look a certain way, act a certain way, dress a certain way, be a certain way in order to be taken seriously. And so I just thought it's such a cool thing to get to sit down with someone I'd wanted to interview for so long and just do it as myself. And it really did take so much pressure off me. I think that if I had gone through the full glamorizing myself or, putting on makeup or whatever, it just would have added a bit of, I don't know, something to the experience that I didn't want there. So I ended up showing up at his house wearing exactly what I wore on the plane. And it was great because I was so comfortable. I literally sat crisscross applesauce and interviewed him on a comfy chair. And I really appreciated the experience. I'm so glad that I got to meet him and connect with him in real life and really, truly experience this person who, if you've ever seen him at conference, he is bigger than life. He is larger than life. He's at my conferences, I speak on stage for 5 hours and I feel like that's superhuman. He literally will teach for 12 hours for days and days in a row. And you're like, how? This guy is an alien. This cannot be real. And I was so grateful to get to sit with him in real life and meet the human being who was so sweet, and his energy was so tender and so real and so loving, and just not there's something to be said for the person who shows up on stage at a UPW, because man, that energy kicked my butt at the exact moment in life when I needed my butt kicked. But I was really blessed to get to meet the real person. So I got to talk to him we talked about health and how to have better energy and mindset and the 3 most important questions you can ask yourself. And it's a really tactical conversation. But truthfully, my favorite part is the end of our chat, because I really wanted to be able to connect with Tony on a level that wasn't maybe always what he's used to talking about. And I try really hard in all of my interviews. My intention is to give the best interview, to give y'all information. Like, I want to give you the tactics and the ideas from these guests. So I don't really interview people asking them what I'd like to know. I try an interview asking what I think the audience wants to know. But at the end, I was like, you know what? This is my last moment with him. I really just want to ask him something that's from me and from my heart. And I asked him a question, and he ended up getting really emotional, and he ended up crying. And then I was crying, and the crew was crying, and it just was this beautiful, very unexpected moment. And I loved our conversation. I'm so grateful that this lined up so that I could have had this experience in my life. And I really hope you enjoy this conversation that I got to have with Tony Robbins.
I'm yours.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you my intention always. Great. Is to give the audience, typically I would say, to give them things to feel curious about, to question, to maybe think of things in a different way than they have before. But I feel like this is a really rare opportunity, obviously, because my audience has heard me talk about you for years. And so
that's wonderful.
I would really love, if they are not already familiar with you, I'd love to familiarize them with your work and also talk about the new stuff, if that's
Thank
cool.
you. I appreciate that very much.
And obviously, if I don't think I can ask anything bad, but if I do, just punch me in the face.
There's nothing to worry about. If you want to do something over yourself, this is a relaxed environment. Whatever supports you.
So I guess let's just start with, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I'm freaking out, but other than that, I'm doing really well.
What are you freaking out about?
This is a culmination of a lot of years of seeing this moment and not knowing that it would come to fruition in quite this way. But now I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, this makes sense.
That's
this
great. I'm glad.
Yeah, so I'm pumped. And we've spoken at, I've gotten to speak at a couple of your events, but I've never actually met you. So to be sitting in your house.
I know we've been passing running. I was at one feature. I was following you right afterwards, and we kind of passed for 2 seconds.
Yeah, so it's rad. The new book is all about health. And I was just curious, coming off of 2 years of everything shifting for so many people, what are some of the things that you've seen? How has that affected people mindset-wise?
I think we've all seen, unfortunately, right? You've seen last year, I think it was the highest number of overdoses on drugs, suicide for kids, ideation of suicide, actual suicide. But I think it was the CDC that said 1 in 5 kids under the age of 30 considered suicide during that time. I mean, it's pretty horrific. Johns Hopkins just did a study talking about the lockdowns and their impact and what they unfortunately know and understood they would do. And so our kids, I think, is the biggest piece. I was fortunate here to be in Florida, so we've been open the whole time. Our kids have been in school, but in so many places the kids aren't in school; they're forced to wear a mask.
Right.
And the science has been evolving, and as it's been evolving, unfortunately, there have been consequences. So I think there's a lot of fear out there, obviously, still. But I also think there are a lot of people that are kind of fed up and ready to move to the next level of their lives after 2 years. And I think that's healthy because we have to restore our children. Right. We have to restore the environment, and we also have to learn how to live with risk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 4-letter word now. And if you saw the people that started our country had a 1 in 3 chance to make it for a year, they would, I think, be turning over in their grave at how much we've been conditioned. It's nobody's fault. It's in the media environment we're in. Media people really care. I don't think they're trying to harm anybody. I think most of them are trying to educate people. But, they also have to enrich their shareholders. And the only way that is get your attention.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, it's not about informing you anymore. It's about startling you. When I startle you, I get your attention. And so we lived in a world where a whole series of things happened we didn't understand, and we overreacted perhaps in some cases, maybe underreacted in others. But what it's left people with is a lot of uncertainty. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to bring to people that, we're living in this one place where everybody feels like they're vulnerable, and yet we're actually at one of the greatest times in human history that most people don't know about.
Right.
Because the average doctor cares so deeply. But the half-life of medical education today, according to Harvard, is between 18 and 24 months, which means...
that was a trip when I read that.
And by the way, that was in 2017. They said by this time, 2022, would be 73 days, which means you spent your entire life, 4 years, and then additional education, obviously, but those initial 4 years, work your guts out, and literally half of that's gone. Say, let's call it a year and a half later. So who educates that person, unfortunately, is the pharmaceutical salesperson. And that's how we had the opioid crisis, because they lied. So imagine you're a doctor caring about people and you want to do anything to help them get out of pain. Oh, this is totally great. They won't get addicted, and they get addicted and die. I mean, doctors are in the worst position ever because things happen so fast today, and there's only so much they can do. That, you know, I often tell my friends, sometimes they get frustrated, their doctor doesn't have the answers. Like, hey, chill out a little bit. Imagine you're walking by a river and you're a devoted person. This book is filled with the best doctors in the world, best scientists, best Nobel laureates. 150 of them I interviewed to make this work. So none of it's my opinion.
Right.
But I said, you meet these people. They're the most dedicated human beings. You probably have a doctor who's totally devoted, will probably give up their own health for you. So the metaphor is you're walking along and you hear somebody in the river and they're drowning. It's like, they don't care about themselves. They'll dive in, pull you out, give you mouth to mouth. But as soon as they do that, they hear 2 more screams. Get one, save them, get others, save them. They're exhausted. They hear 4 more screams. They don't have time to go upstream and see who's throwing them in. So this book is about what's upstream so you can avoid ever being in that position, right? And so we're trying to find the breakthroughs that are there. Because right now, Rachel, what's happening is most people know technology has grown dynamically. About every 18 months, we double in power and half in cost. That's why, you know, I had one of the original cell phones. You're probably too young to remember, but I had one. It was, you know, a foot long. It weighed 2 pounds. It cost $4,000. That'd be $10,000 today.
Right.
And you had to charge it for 6 hours to get 30 minutes of talk time, right? And now you got your Apple phone that you get for free with a contract, and it's 100 times the power of what the Apollo mission took somebody to the moon in the back.
Right.
So technology is going really rapidly now on our bodies because we are code. Meaning, I'm sure you've heard about CRISPR and gene editing. I mean, there's a young man that was on America's Got Talent that can see now again because of gene therapy. Wow. There are children who have sickle cell anemia that it's cured. We're not talking about, you know, we're dealing with it. We're talking about pure cures, taking it right out of the DNA. So things like that are happening. And then things less high tech, but they're just as powerful. So, you know, people have osteoarthritis, tens of millions of people. It's unbelievably painful. So they've always taken all these painkillers, which are not good for you, right? And so there's a company right now that's in 3rd phase of the FDA, so your audience knows. First phase is safety, second is effectiveness, efficacy, and then the third one is efficacy at scale, and then you get approved. So they're in that final stage. So if they get approved, which they think they will in the fall of this year or beginning next year, you take a single injection and your whole body's racked with arthritis, or you have a knee, whatever it is. You regrow all your tendons in 11 months because your own stem cells are stimulated by this thing called the Wnt pathway. And literally you grow like 16-year-old tendons, even if you're 40, 50, 60 years old, 70 years old, because it takes the original code and uses it to regrow your tendons. I mean, people that have anxiety or PTSD, you know, one of the tragedies in our country right now, and a lot of moms are dealing with this with somebody else in their family perhaps, or maybe a father or somebody, but people who go to war and come back, or people that have been through rapes or they've been through horrific things. And I work with Underground Railroad. We've sponsored literally, I guess now almost 18,000 children to free them. And these kids have been locked up in the most horrific situation being used. How do you turn them around? It's so inside. So I know how to do that. I've had a gentleman years ago that came to my Date with Destiny, and he'd been to both Afghanistan and Iraq, dark glasses because the lights alone could set him off, night sweats, shakes, everything, right? Just horrific. You know, by the end of 2 hours, I got his glasses off, got all of it out. I actually brought him on CNN, and the female producer cried when she met him because she saw how he was and saw how he changed. But if I work 24 hours a day, I can't catch the 22. So I looked for a scalable solution. Well, Rachel, right now, there's a single injection. The Army has just done a 3-year study, 85% successful in getting rid of anxiety and PTSD extreme. So like I sponsored 100 vets. The first vet I ever sponsored, I'll never forget because I'm still in touch with him, writes me and says, I just got back from Afghanistan. He said, I happen to be able to hug my children. I haven't been able to even be around my wife. He goes, everything makes me either enraged or the world's in black and white. And he said, there's no color to my life. And I tried to commit suicide twice. He didn't know me personally. I just created the sponsorship. And he said, so I just want to thank you. He said, 20 minutes after the shot, I still have the memories, but none of the emotions.
Wow.
And he said,
that?
like, everything's in color again. He said, I went and hugged my wife and children for the first time. And he's helped me get other people to go through the program. Literally 85% successful. It's a shot that when you get stuck in what's called sympathetic, really adrenalized, which is what PTSD is, it literally breaks the pattern. So usually it's one shot or a maximum of 2 shots 1 week apart, and the entire nervous system resets. So we're living in a world where things that seemed impossible are here right now. They're not things that are 20 or 30 years in the future that you might guess. And so I wanted to take all of these things, the simple things you can do with your body, whether you sleep and breathe and exercise, of course those also, and little shortcuts there. But also, what are the things you can do for your kids? What can you do for your spouse? Most importantly, for women, what can you do for yourself?
Right.
Because I got to tell you, like, I have a house full of women, as you can see. I've got 5 kids and
lucky
5 grandkids.
Lucky,
very lucky me. But I have a 10-month-old daughter now. That was COVID. We said we'll give it one last chance, and I have a 48-year-old daughter. So my respect for women is through the roof. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how a single mom with even one child versus multiple children, or single mom working mom, how they do it, because I've been through this for a while. I got 5 kids and 5 grandkids, but at this stage of my life again, seeing what my wife goes through, what my family goes through here to bring this beautiful soul in the world. And every man here is blessed because we all came through a woman.
Right.
Nobody made it without a woman. So there's an entire chapter on women's health that I did not write. And all the book, I brought everybody together, but I wanted to be written from women's perspectives. Yeah. So Dr. Carolyn DeLuca and 2 other incredibly brilliant physicians, and showing women solutions that aren't often talked about, and how they can find solutions after having a baby. What happens to you hormonally? What happens to you physically? What happens to your desire for intimacy? And so there's some peptides that will, if you want to recreate that desire, that actually do it. And then have blue pills, not just blood flow.
Right.
For a woman, it's a lot more. She's trying to think about the kids and the house and themselves and her work and make a difference in the world. And maybe they've got a spouse and it's like, how do I do all that? Men tend to be able to just focus on one thing at a time. Women's brains work differently.
Absolutely.
But this is a neurological tool. It's just simple peptides, little molecules that trigger the brain to be able to feel that enjoyment again. Or lasers that change the texture of what's happened to a woman, literally painless lasers that overnight. There's one woman who, had incontinence. She's only 41 years old, but she's had 3 children and really rough situation, and never even told her husband that it's not that she doesn't love him or doesn't want him, but couldn't enjoy the sensual experience of life. One treatment with this femi laser, and she's now able to have that intimate experience and want it and experience it. So most people give up, because if you go to standard of care, you'll find, I was just with Dr. Peter Diamandis, a good friend of mine. He's a rocket scientist and a Harvard MD. And he was just talking about the fact that he just read the recent study that in almost every industry in medicine, it's about 20 to 22 years behind what the latest situation is. And so I experienced that myself when I had something happen to me that was supposed to end my career. So what we're trying to do is bring people the best, keep it really simple, and say, here's where your options are that people don't even know are options.
Right. But does this feel like sort of a response to almost the hopelessness that we've sort of encountered?
I didn't intend it that way, but it is.
Yeah.
Because hope to me is a good strategy. A better strategy is an experience. Right. Hope's a good place to start. But if I can give you something, an experience, then it's true. Yeah. And so what we try to do is create things that people could experience quickly and go, it's more than hope. This is real.
Right.
But I didn't write the book, honestly, initially for that intent. I wrote it because I got really messed up. I've always had this fear of cancer. I don't know, have you ever had any major fears about any particular disease in your life?
I have a lot of mental illness in my family.
Okay, so that would be a concern for you.
Who is schizophrenic.
Well, my family, there was cancers. And when I was really young, I worked 20-hour days, and I was blessed to be able to work with some really amazing people and turn their lives around, business people, politicians, some extraordinary athletes. So by the time I was 20, I was, rocking it, so to speak. And then, I don't know, that part of your brain that most of us have in there, that survival brain kicks in every now and then and starts telling you stuff, like all the lies you wrote about in your book, right? That's where it comes from. Yeah. It doesn't come from your heart.
Right.
It doesn't come from your spirit. It doesn't come from God.
Right.
It comes from the survival brain that it's no longer needing to avoid a saber-toothed tiger and make us freeze or make us, fight or flight. So now we worry about what people think about us, or do we have enough money, or how do we look, or are we enough, and all those things. So what happened for me was all of a sudden my brain started going, you're going to die young. That's why it all happened so quick.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't just think it, Rachel. I started obsessing about it, and I'm smarter than that. But when you get in that locked place, I wasn't there every moment, but I started dreaming about not dying by being hit by a truck. That'd be easy, slowly through cancer. And so if you focus on something enough.
Hell yeah, you're going to manifest that.
So I manifested first. Secondly, myself, it first started with my girlfriend's mom. She comes home one day crying hysterically. My mom, what? She's cancer. They're giving her 9 months to live. And I think if it would have been me, as a mom, as a dad, you and I both know we'll do more for those we love than we'll do for ourselves. And so when you know that, it's good to use it. But I think God used it for me, because if it me, I probably would have been overwhelmed. But because it was her, I was like, I'm going to solve this. And, I'm Mr. Solution. I study everything, synthesize it. So I said, listen, success leaves clues. I learned that from my original teacher, Jim Rohn, right? I was like, there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people who have been stage 4 cancer, told they're going to die and are alive. I'm going to find out what they did.
Right.
Because they did something different than other people, right? And so I started reading books, and I found this book called One Answer to Cancer. It's not the book I'd recommend today because there's better tools, but this is, 40 years ago. And it was written by a man who was a dentist who had pancreatic cancer, which is the most deadly. They gave him 6 weeks to live, and 12 years later, he writes this book, and he's totally healthy and vibrant.
Wow.
And so he had this process of detoxing the body and then giving the body certain nutrients that it needed. And so bottom line is I gave this woman, her name was Jenny. She was in her early 40s. And I said, Jenny, they say you're going to die. I said, I know you don't want to die. And we're both Christians, and we prayed about it. And I said, so I know you've prayed about it. There's got to be a solution. Please read this book. I don't know if it's the end all and be all, but this guy had pancreatic cancer, much more severe than yours. Why don't you give it a shot? And she, at the time, she had a tumor that was protruding on her shoulder, and she had some in her feminine organs, right? It metastasized. So it was pretty brutal. That's why they gave her 9 weeks to live. And I also gave her the book As a Man Thinketh, to help her guide her mind a little bit. And so I'm just turning 20 years old, and all of a sudden I witnessed this woman transform. Like in 2-3 weeks, her energy was back. She felt vital. She wasn't in pain all the time. And about 8-10 weeks into it, you couldn't find anything physically on her body. You couldn't even touch and feel it. And so after she'd outlived when they said she was going to die, the doctor finally said, well, maybe we should do exploratory surgery. So she comes to me. Imagine this, Rachel. Somebody comes to you and you're just 19, just turning 20, and somebody says, should I do it or not? I'm like,
you're like, I don't know.
I said, if I tell you no and you die, I said, I can't tell you what to do, but if it was me, you're making a lot of progress. I'd at least wait. That the doctor convinced her. They did the exploratory surgery, and they find in her entire body, the only thing found was a piece of a tumor the size of my pinky fingernail compared to what it had been. So the doctor said, this is a miracle. And she said, it is a miracle, but I did my part. Let me tell you what I did. He goes, no, this is a miracle. I don't want to hear what you said. There is no such thing. And so she started speaking at churches. She's now in her mid-80s, totally alive today. But she's responsible for this book to some extent because she changed my mindset from fear, like most people have about COVID, to no, I don't have to be a victim of this, and made me a biohacker. So then I become this crazy guy that's on stage. You've seen 12, 14 hours a day for 4 or 5 days with 10, 15, 20,000 people in a stadium, holding them. Well, that takes unbelievable energy. So I learned everything I could to build my body. And then I'm 32. And what happens? Tumor. Where does it come from? I didn't even know I have it. I'm a helicopter pilot. So I go to get, every 2 years you have to get approval. So you have to get another physical. And I go to this FDA physical.
Also, I just feel like you just threw out casually, I'm a helicopter pilot. So when I didn't acknowledge it, because I'm still processing what you just said, and I feel like, okay, sure you are. Also,
I like to learn things that are great. I love to take people flying. Flying is such a beautiful gift.
I hope you're taking me later tonight. That feels fun. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but it's not interrupting. But because of that, I get this physical I probably wouldn't have otherwise. I'm fit. I'm 32. There's nothing to think about, right? So many cancers happen now at that early stage of life. And so I get this call, and my assistant keeps saying, the doctor keeps calling, wants to talk to you. And I said, please ask him, just send the report. I was, like your life. And you know what it's like. Go, 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 go. I'm leaving for the south of France for a seminar. I come home that night, and there's a note taped to my door from my assistant saying, you must call the doctor. He says it's an emergency. And it's unfortunately at home after midnight. So I called, no answer. And what happens in your head? I don't know about you,
You're
but
like,
I'm like,
I'm dying. Someone's dead. I'm dying.
I'm dying.
We're
Like, I was
all
like,
dying.
but I'm going, it's not possible. I'm so religious. I take care of my ability. I'm like, yeah, but I fly all the time. There's all this radiation maybe. So, the head goes crazy. So then fortunately at that point, I found a way to center myself. And I had this whole thing of that. I still use it today, actually, that, a coward dies 1,000 times. A courageous person once, right? So I'm not going to think of every scenario. Let me wake up in the morning and figure it out. Woke up with foreboding, called the doctor. And he says, I'm sorry to inform you, Mr. Robbins, but you have a tumor in your brain. And I'm like, what? How could you possibly know that? I came for a physical. You didn't do anything related to scanning my brain.
Right.
He said, well, I know you have a lot of growth hormone. I said, where'd you get that breakthrough? My hand's bigger than your head. I got a 16 shoe. I grew 10 inches in a year. I'm 6'7". How'd you figure that out?
Yeah.
Right? He goes, this is not funny. I said, well, he said, because of that, I thought you might have gigantism. And I did some blood tests. And you have enormous amount of growth hormone in your body. And so there's a pituitary tumor. That's the only way we can resolve this level of growth hormone. So we need to do a scan on you, an MRI, and put you in surgery immediately. I'm 32 years old. Everything's like top of my world. What? So I did not respond well, I have to be honest. I was like, but wait a second. I said, well, let's say this was true. What's the prognosis? He said, well, I have to inform you before surgery, you can die, but it's unlikely. But your hormones are not going to be the same. Your whole system will be different, and you should not plan on the kind of energy you have. And I'm like, I don't have the energy. That's my life, right? So I said, could you recommend somebody for a second opinion? And he was a very gruff guy. Most doctors not like this, but he was a very gruff guy. He didn't like being questioned. And so sure enough, because of Jenny, I knew the importance of a second opinion. But I want your audience to know something as an aside. The Mayo Clinic here in this country in 2017 did a study now that is used over and over again. 287 patients got a first opinion, got a second opinion. The second opinion was the same as the first opinion, only 12% of the time. That means 88% of the time it was different. So now even the Mayo Clinic says, even our doctors get a second opinion, and they believe by getting a second and third opinion, you refine the diagnosis. I didn't know that, but I knew from my own experience, second opinion. He was not happy. And I thought, you know what, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm going tomorrow morning south of France. I'm going to go do my seminar. But, about 3 days into the seminar, my brain's like, am I going to die? Do I really have a tumor?
My brain's going to explode. Yeah.
It's like your mind. And I know how to run my mind a lot better now, but I didn't have much mastery then, and it's a scary thing. So I came back and did the scan. I see the guy when I'm coming out of the tube, and by the look on his face, I knew it was there. Guy told me, yes, you got it. It swallowed a little of itself up. We can't explain how, but it's huge. It's there. It's forcing this growth hormone, and we must do surgery. So I decided, let me get another opinion. Let me go to an endocrinologist, not a surgeon, see if he has a different point of view. I flew to Boston because I had a friend who knew one of the top endocrinologists. Completely different guy. Hopefully you have a doctor out there, if you're listening, who's like this, totally heartfelt, heart-centered. It's hard, though. These doctors lose people, so I understand why they can get harsh, right? Yeah. They're trying to protect themselves. Beautiful man. I've just loved hanging with him. And he says, now you do have this tumor, and we do need to do something, but don't do the surgery under any circumstances. He said, that is way too risky. There's this new drug in Switzerland. You can fly twice a year, every 6 months, get this injection, and then your arteries around the heart won't get so big. Gigantism, that's how you die. So I was like, okay, doc. But I said, didn't you just tell me my arteries are the perfect size for my heart right now? He said, yes. I said, why would I do this then? He said, well, just to be certain. That way you'll be certain it won't happen. I said, well, what if I'm already certain? Or more importantly, what if I just measured it along the way? I mean, there could be side effects from the drug. He goes, there's no side effects from this drug. It's really a great drug. I've seen some of the studies. It's fantastic. And I finally said, well, what if I didn't do it? I said, this doc wants to, he goes, well, the baker wants to bake. The surgeon wants to cut. I'm an endocrinologist. I want to drug you. He was just so honest and so beautiful. But he goes, I mean, I wouldn't do it, but if you want to, you could measure it each year. And if it got bigger, then apply it. I said, I think that's what I'm going to do. Sure enough, 6 months later, the drug never made it through the FDA in the US because they found it caused cancer. So I missed another bullet.
Wow.
And then the end of the story is I went to 6 different doctors after him. And the last one says to me, Tony, you do the equivalent of 2.5 marathons in a weekend, physiologically. He said, I've never seen anybody recover 2 days later like you have. He said, that growth hormone, I think, is how you're able to recover. It's like a gift from God. I was like, I like that belief system, right? Yeah. It feels a lot better. Made me big so I could serve in a different way, made me strong. And he said, and I know bodybuilders that spend $1,200, a month.
Trying to get
that same amount of hormone you're getting for free, buddy. So I'm now 62 in a few weeks. This was 32. 30 years later, I've measured each year. There's been no problem. I'm fine. And the reason I tell the story is because most of us overreact. It's just like COVID, right? It's like, what makes people die of COVID, according to the CDC, other than being really elderly with immune system compromise? It's being obese. And we can do something about that. It's the number one factor. 79.8, 80% of the people that died of COVID were obese.
Wow.
And most people know that now, but we don't talk about it. And we can. It's like, want to get out of fear? Let's do something to take care of you.
Right.
But there's none of that. And then you know what the number 2 is?
I don't.
I put this in the book because I couldn't even believe the CDC acknowledged this. They say the number 2 factor of dying is fear, anxiety and fear. Because the brain, when you get really fearful, it's known as psychoneuroimmunology, turns off your immune system. Your brain, when you get fearful, changes your heartbeat, makes it erratic. Your blood pressure changes. Everything changes, right? So part of what you really want to learn to do is take control of your head and your mind. And then here's the final thing that happened. Why I finally wrote this book. I'm giving that background because I want your audience to know I'm a 6'7" guy, and some people see me on stage to tell those people, and they think like he's some indestructible creature. I'm not. I have the same fears. I've had the same challenges that I know many people in your audience do. And I want them to know that we can turn those around because there's new answers, but you got to educate yourself. And so the final step in that chapter was about 4 years ago, I'm being an idiot. I'm coming down in Sun Valley on a snowboard, following a young semi-professional snowboarder who clearly has moves I don't have. And I wiped out. I thought I broke my neck. It was so painful. I tore all my rotator cuffs. And the pain, I've lived with pain. It was 9 pain on a 0 to 10 scale because it was nerve pain. Like I couldn't sleep. You know what I mean? Like I slept an hour and one night, hour and 15 minutes the other night. And then I found this device, and I'll plant seeds with your audience. They're in the book. It's called a PEMF. If anybody in your audience has significant pain, they got to look in this device. And they don't have to own one. There are many people that have them, doctors that have them. But it's a pulse electronic magnetic frequency. It's a mouthful, right? And somebody came and treated me with it, and my pain went from 9 to 5, where I could sleep for the first time.
Wow.
And it was a miracle. It's got 3,000 studies. If you've broken a bone, it'll, like you care about your kids, you treat them with this, and it grows back, it heals back in 50% of the time. Tons of studies. Nerve replacement. But it wasn't enough for the amount of damage I did to heal it completely. So what do? Go to your doctor. So I go one doctor, and I know to get more than one opinion. He's like, surgery, immediately. Surgery. And then I was like, well, what's the prognosis? Well, you may not be able to lift your arm above your shoulder ever again. I mean, this is my life, right?
How are you going to make your move?
How are you going to make my move like this?
Or tell the DJ to stop playing the music.
And then 4 to 6 months of rehab. So you can imagine me on stage with one arm trying to make those happen. So I said to him, there's got to be a better solution. And then the fourth guy says to me, Tony, at first he tells me, oh my God, you saved my marriage. I didn't know who he was. I mean, I didn't know he was a client or had been to my events, but he had been. You changed my life. I made all this money in my business. He literally went on for like 15 minutes. And then he finally went, okay, thank you for hearing all that. I really want to thank you, but now I got to be your doctor. And he literally does this. He looks at me and says, this is your spine. He puts it up on the screen. He says, life as you know it is over. And I paused and I was like, you didn't go to my communication seminar. Clearly, did you? Right? Trying to laugh. He said, this is not funny. He said, you cannot snowboard. You cannot run. You cannot jump. My entire life, right? You can't do those things. He says, you see this. He goes, one good hit. And I've been in pain for 14 years. You have severe spinal stenosis. One good hit, and you may not be able to walk again. Not be able to use an arm again. And I'm like, and I'm a strong guy, but somebody punches you and you're ready, it's one thing. Somebody punches you, you're not ready. I literally left, I got in the car, I cried, I called my wife. I don't usually cry like that, but I was like, holy shit, is my life over, Yeah. And then, the part of me that knows better, there is a solution. You're going to find the way kicked in. And so I called Peter Diamandis, who's a rocket scientist, but he's also an MD from Harvard and a good friend of mine, a partner. And he knows everybody in the tech business. And I'd asked all these doctors about stem cells, right? Because I have some of the greatest athletes of all time are my people that I coach and my clients. And so like Cristiano Ronaldo, he was supposed to be out for 3 months, greatest soccer player of all time, 2.5 weeks, he's back because of stem cells, right? So they all said, no, it won't work. So I said, Peter, who's the best expert on stem cells in the world? And he said, well, he's somebody you met once. He said, really? He goes, Dr. Bob Harari. And he was a neurosurgeon. I said, he knows about stem cells? He said, he's one of the father of stem cells. He did these original studies where they took old rats 38 years ago, almost 40 years ago, gave them young rat's blood, and they got younger. Their their hair turned black again, their muscles got stronger. And then they reversed it and gave the old blood to the young rats, and they got older.
Yeah.
So it started that thing that you heard about in Silicon Valley, young blood, they were all looking for. It was crazy, but it led to discovering what stem cells really do and how they are. So he said to me, Tony, and by the way, meeting him is like, somebody says, I want to learn about basketball. And you say, well, meet my friend LeBron James.
Right.
He's that smart.
Yeah.
So I meet Bob, and he says, Tony, a lot of people in America go get stem cells, use their own body to do it. It's called autologous, meaning the ones from you. He said, but, maybe for an elbow or a wrist that could work. But once you turn 40, they drop off the cliff. And he said, and you're 53, doesn't matter how fit you are, those stem cells are dropping. He said, so for this, that won't do it. You need like the force of life force.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you need like 4-day-old stem cells. And I said, well, I don't want fetal tissue under any circumstance. He goes, no, it's not fetal tissue. They don't do that anymore. I said, and he would never recommend it. I said, well, what is it? He goes, well, when a baby's born.
I love this chapter in the book.
Isn't it beautiful?
It blew my mind.
Yeah, you've got the force of life in the placenta. Right. It's like the 3D printer of the baby. Right. It's got all of the protein factors and all the stem cells, and you have the cord. And most parents now, when you're having a baby in the hospital, they give you that option. Bob's the one who created that option.
It's so crazy.
So he's the guy. So I said, okay, so what do I do? He goes, I'll tell you where to go. They'll give you cord stem cells, 4 days old, force of life. And he said, you can always go back to the surgery, but I believe this will heal you. So I did 4 days, 3.5 days. And with just one IV a day for 20 minutes, an IV and a shot. And the first day I felt really tired. I went to sleep early, which is not usually what I do. And the second day I had a cytokine response, kind of a cold and shaking thing for about 15 minutes. I wasn't scared. I knew what it was. And then I went to sleep and I woke up the next morning, and not only was my shoulder perfect, I haven't had the MRI. This was 4 years ago. I have no problem, never had another problem with my shoulder. But also I had no pain in my spine for the first time in 14 years, Rachel. So I became obsessed. I want to know everything about stem cells.
Right.
But what I found out is it isn't just stem cells. There's this revolution in precision medicine and regenerative medicine that's been happening. But again, most people are 20 years behind, docs. They don't have time to update what they're doing. So most of them don't know about it, or they get hype. But you go to Nobel laureates, the 150 I did, you go to the best scientists in the world, the best doctors in the world, they all know about it. And those people who know get the benefit. It's like where ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is pain. Ignorance is disease. Ignorance can be death. So I got invited by the Pope to speak. This is like, the story's unbelievable.
Did you fly there in your helicopter?
No, I didn't fly my helicopter. It'd be a long helicopter flight. But I got invited. The Vatican every 2 years has the biggest conference on stem cell and regenerative medicine. And they bring all the best scientists from around the world in here. And suddenly what happens? I get to meet all these scientists. I'm supposed to be the cleanup speaker. I went to every class. And I met people sent home to die. Not harshly, it's just their treatments, they couldn't help them anymore with their cancers. And I met at least a dozen, more than a dozen. And they met Dr. Carl June and got something called CAR T cells. And here they are 6 years later, totally healthy, cancer-free. I met Jack Nicklaus, the greatest golfer of all time. And he couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes with unbelievable pain. They're going to fuse his spine, which only works about half the time. And even then you lose all your mobility. And he did stem cells instead. Now he's 82 years old and plays golf and tennis again. So that came out. I was like, okay, I want to do like I did with Money Master the Game. I'm going to go interview the best on earth, and I'm going to bring this to the general public, make it really simple, and show them what's here right now, and then things that are within 12 to 36 months. So I can do this today, and this is what's coming. Right. And not 20 years in the future. And so that's what we did, and we're donating all the money from the book. I got Bob Harari to join me as a co-author, and Peter, and I got them convinced to do what I've done my last 3 books. We donated all the money. I got fed when I was a young boy, so I've been feeding people. For Feeding America, I said I'd feed 100 million people every year to 1 billion people in 10 years. We're 7 years in it. We're 850 million meals. So this will provide another 20 million meals. And the balance of the profits are helping with Alzheimer's, cancer, and heart disease.
That's rad.
It's a big story. But
yeah, but what I loved about that chapter was a placenta is typically medical waste.
That's right.
It's just being thrown away.
It's insane.
And also in so many cultures, they actually honor the placenta, or they turn it into something and they eat it. They turn it into powders and pills. And so it's almost like that the information was there and we just didn't have it.
That's right.
And to see that, seriously, that chapter, the spray gun that for
amazing?
a burn victim.
So people know burn victims, normally people don't know this. The reason they look so scarred, because besides the fact they're burned, is the way to keep them alive is they use cadaver skin over their face. And now they can take your own stem cells, and this is in about a dozen hospitals, spray it on you. And there's a picture there. You saw it and you go to video. And literally 6 weeks later, you can't tell they were burned. I mean, that's the world we live in right now. But if you don't know, you're going to do what everybody else does. And your child could be burned and you wouldn't know this. Now, if your child burned, you need to know this exists.
Yeah.
And you can go make this happen.
Yeah. So, we're talking about all of these advancements in medicine, which is so inspiring and exciting. And you can feel your passion. You can feel your passion in the book too.
Good.
I'm curious, what's the balance for the power of our minds? Sort of going back to a more spiritual side of, like you talked about, you can worry enough and fear enough that you are creating illness in your body.
Yeah.
So what is the balance for people of like, inform yourself, get help, like trust in God, but lock your car?
Yes.
Exactly right. How do you, when you approach your own health or your family's health, how do you balance those two things?
I start with the mind and emotions. And to me, that's not, I don't tell people to believe spiritually or religiously, but I believe prayer is a very useful thing. And reminding yourself you're not the center of the universe and asking for guidance and help and other things do that. I personally believe that, but not everybody does. And I don't tell people they have to, but it starts there. But there's also, when you have a spiritual side of your life, there's a lot less anxiety because you believe there's something greater than yourself.
Right.
And then you do your part.
Yeah.
Like you said, I use a similar metaphor when I say it's, trusting God and tie up your camels, that type of thing, right? But what most people don't know is the power of their mind. So there's an entire last 2 chapters of the book. If no one reads anything else, I say, please read those 2 chapters, because if you do everything physically well and you don't manage your mind and emotions, you'll get sick.
Right.
And so placebos, let's just take a moment for that. So everybody's heard of placebos, an inert substance that somehow is used to heal the body. Well, by that inert substance, your brain becomes convinced something happened, and then it does what it needs to do to heal. So most people don't know they were only discovered in World War II. It was discovered because this surgeon, it was actually the nurse that did this, but the surgeon was trying to save people's lives, and you got to give them morphine because of the pain, and also you don't want them going into shock because then they die. And they ran out of morphine.
Right.
And so the doctor's freaking out, and a nurse, who they don't even say her name, they just said a nurse. I wish we knew because she was a really important person. She handed him a syringe, filled it with saline solution. It said, "Doc, we still have some more morphine," because she was wanting to comfort the people there. So he believed it. So when he looked in the eyes of these people, he said, "You will be out of pain in the next 2 minutes." Like he would normally say, "I know this seems insane. You'll be fine. You're going to make it." Not one went into shock. 90% of them were out of pain, and they gave them no drugs.
Right.
So after World War II, he went back to Harvard, and he was the doctor that started the studies that now we almost compare every drug to a placebo. But what they don't talk about a lot of times is often placebos are as or more effective than the drugs, but you don't make billions of dollars talking about placebos, right? So, but here's something else your audience should know, because it tells you the power of your mind. The size of the intervention affects your certainty and how quickly you heal.
Okay, say that again. Break that
I'll
down.
give you an example. A small pill versus a large pill. And we see a very big difference in the speed and power of healing.
No way.
Even though there's nothing in the pill, okay? A injection, much bigger response to an injection than a pill, because you go, wow, something really happened. A fake surgery, a placebo surgery, the VA, I put this in the book, Veterans Administration was doing arthroscopic surgery on people's knees. So they decided to take a third of the people in a study and do a fake surgery, placebo surgery, meaning they just put a scar across here, like they cut them up and sewed them up, but didn't touch the knee. A year later, when they did the evaluations on how much pain do you have, how much mobility, the people that had no surgery said no pain, they're totally healed. And the group that did had all kinds of aches and pains and problems still of the actual surgery. So the VA won't even pay for that surgery anymore. That's how powerful it is to give an idea. But it goes beyond that. Harvard did a study where they didn't give you a placebo. They give you a real drug. So they hand you a barbiturate, but they put in a giant pill that's red. This sounds like a movie, right? And they go, this is an amphetamine. You need to be prepared. Your body's going to speed up. Don't panic when your heart starts beating so fast, everything else. And then they give it to you. Well, guess what? To a man or a woman, their bodies should slow down. They begin a drug, a barbiturate, shake you through the floor, sped up through the roof. And then they did the opposite. They could do the opposite with somebody with a blue pill, tell them the opposite, and got the opposite response. So Dr. Ellen Langer is from Harvard. She started mindfulness, one of the people that began it. She's done studies on aging. Everybody's concerned about aging. Well, so much of it has to do with your belief systems about it. And our culture in America is very different, let's say, in Asian culture, where elderly people are often held as wives.
Right.
Very different here. We're obsessed with youth, right?
Yeah.
So she took a group, I think people in their 70s, and took them off to the Catskills, to this old place redid the entire place where every poster on the wall, old TV shows was from 35 years earlier. And then she said, you must speak for the next 2 weeks in the first person as if it was 19, whatever it was, 35 years earlier. And what was amazing, they did all their vitals and so forth before they went in, and they did it afterwards. Well, first of all, when they came back, their eyesight improved. There's no way to describe how that's humanly possible. Their blood pressure balanced, their blood sugar balanced, and they look, you see the photographs, you wouldn't even believe, they look so much younger. So it's so much of what we don't have. And I'll give you the last example. It's so powerful. So there's a man named Norman Cousins, Dr. Norman Cousins.
Yeah.
Oh, you've heard of him.
I know him, but I don't know why.
Well, people know in the back because he was so famous. He's kind of the father of psychoneuroimmunology, the idea that your mind affects your immune system, like the CDC talked about, right? I met him when I was 24, 25 because I was doing these firewalks, and he was fascinated. So we developed this great friendship. In those days, there weren't podcasts. I just had this little cassette program that I interviewed people, and we sent it out to people. And he said, Tony, your mind is more powerful than you think of. This is a man who, by the way, was diagnosed with this deadly disease, didn't want to do the drugs, the side effects were too intense. So decided when he was in pain, as his body was breaking down, he thought he could heal his brain by being in a different state of mind. Laughter. He believed if he laughed enough, that's probably how you know him, that he could heal his body. So whenever he felt pain, he would go off for 4 or 5 hours and watch all these old silly movies and laugh as hard as he could. And I think it was 11 months, and he was cured of the disease, which no one has ever seen happen before. Not only get out of pain, but literally his immune system took over. He wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness. So there's buildings, at UCLA named after him. He's an amazing man. But he told me a story I never forgot. He said, Tony, not only can you make yourself sick or healthy by your mind, but you can also make other people sick or healthy by a viral response. I said, how do you get a viral response to your mind? He said, well, if somebody's around you and they yawn, and you're like, oh, don't do that. You find yourself yawning, or somebody's laughing. It's not that funny, but they're having such a good time. You find yourself laughing. He goes, that happens with people's idea of illness. So, well, give me an example. He said, well, I'll tell you, I went to a college football game. He said, I'm in the stands. He said, all of a sudden, this person about 20 rows away starts projectile vomiting. And they call for the doctor who's on staff. They come and grab this man. They're trying to see what's wrong with him. And they're trying to ask him questions. They calm him down. They're putting cold presses on him and to see, like, what did you do today? Trying to find something different to see what the source would be. And the man mentioned that about 30 minutes before, he'd gone to the vending machine and bought this Coke. So the doc thought, maybe there's something in the electronics there that's leaking. There's some poison that's getting in there. So no one else would get sick. He announces over the loudspeaker at halftime, please avoid the vending machines. We may have a real challenge with them. We have a man who got very sick. We just want to be careful. He said, Tony, it was like a cartoon. He said, within 5 to 10 minutes, people are projectile vomiting all over the place. They had 12 ambulances taking people to 2 different hospitals. And then about an hour and a half later, they did these tests and found there was nothing wrong with it. And they told everybody it was fine, and everybody got healed. So that's the power your mind has. And so most of us, when we have kids, man or woman, you tend to worry more, right? It's just the nature of things. But sometimes those worries are not only sucking the energy out of your body, but also your kids learn to be fearful because they sense you're fearful. And so one of the greatest things is learning how to take control of your mind. And so I have a whole chapter on the 3 decisions that people make that if you take control of those, you're going to be in a completely different place.
Right.
And then training yourself to have a habit, because most people have a highway to stress and a dirt road to happiness. But that's just conditioning.
Right.
And there's simple ways to condition yourself. So after a while, you have a highway to happiness and a dirt road to stress. And then you have a different life. Then mothering, fathering, business, life, relationships start to transform.
Right. I want people to hear this because just in case they haven't been to a UPW before, understanding that they have the ability to reprogram their mind.
Yes.
And I think so many people, women especially, sort of accept it as a lot in life. Kind of like, well, this is the way we're wired, or this is how my people are, or this is our genes. And it's not true. I mean, everything you're saying in the last 20 minutes, it makes me want to I don't want to break your mirror, but I sort of do, because why aren't people talking about this? Our minds are so powerful, and we reach for the quick fix, right? Yeah. We want the alcohol, we want the pill, we want the thing that's going to solve it.
Or even Tylenol. I write about that in the book. You can't believe the side effects of Tylenol. It burns holes in your liver, and it gets promoted for things that it does nothing for.
Yeah.
It's just really good marketing. It's been around forever. So we think it's something outside of ourselves. But you mentioned something really important. this is my lot in life. This is my DNA, right? This is my genome. Most people say DNA, right? Those 3.2 billion letters from your mom and 3.2 from your dad that make up the genes of your body and genome, they do not determine your destiny. Doctors and anybody who's really in science knows it today. They still teach it in some schools, but it's not true.
Right.
It's the plan, but which genes turn on or off? Typically have the same genome and have a totally different reaction. Which genes get turned on or off determines your life, and that's based on something called the epigenome. EPI, epi means above.
Right.
So a good metaphor to keep it simple, imagine the piano is your DNA and the piano player is your epigenome, but that's affected by your diet, how much you move or exercise, how much you sleep or don't sleep, what kind of food you eat, how many chemicals you're exposed to, radiation. But there's something really cool. It's a little technical, but it's in the book, so you don't have to remember this, but I want people to know, besides the mind, you want to give the body the energy so the mind works.
Right.
Right? They affect each other. And so there's a man who's probably the top longevity expert in the world, Dr. Sinclair out of Harvard. He's 53 years old, but he's 33 years old biochemically.
Wow.
His dad is 80. When his dad was, I think, 71, he started to lose cognition. He couldn't, exercise anymore. He stayed home and started to dissipate. So when he started discovering these ways of slowing and actually, in some cases, appears to reverse the aging, which sounded, if you said that 3 years ago, people would say you're insane. But there have been a Nobel Prize winner that did it in animals, and then David's done it in animals, and then David started using himself and his father. His father now outlifts him in the gym, walks 2 to 3 miles a day to give you perspective. And what's making that change? So here's the magic. Most people know that this force of energy comes from every cell in your body called mitochondria. They are the furnaces that build your energy. Those mitochondria create something called ATP. It's like the batteries. If someone gets cyanide, the reason people die in 30 seconds is it cuts all the oxygen and literally you can't create energy in the body, right? So most people have heard that. It's interesting. But what they don't know is there are 7 specific genes. There's a term for them called sirtuins. No one has to remember that. But these 7 genes do 2 really important and competing things. And this will help moms at home and help them understand the people they care about. The first thing that these genes do is they turn on and off your genes. If the right genes are turned on, you're going to be great. You're going to stay young. The wrongs are on, you're going to age quickly. You're going to break down from disease. Second thing these special genes do is they reduce inflammation in the body, which is the basis of most breakdown. And the third thing to do is help food get converted for mitochondria as the source of energy. That alone makes them priceless. But then they have a second task. As you get older, once you leave your 20s and 30s and enter 40s and 50s and beyond, your DNA gets corrupted by radiation, by exposure, by chemicals in the environment. And so no problem. These sirtuins, these master genes, go in and clean it up. Just one problem. They need a fuel called NAD. And NAD drops off the cliff in your mid-40s, and by 50s, you literally lost 50% of it. So now there's no fuel for these master genes. So now your inflammation increases in your body. Genes that should be off get turned on. You have less energy for everything, including cognition. And all this is competing with trying to keep your DNA cleaned up. And as you get older, you accumulate those challenges. So right at the time you need it most, it all starts to break down. And that's what we call aging. There is a solution. It sounds like a horrible thing. A metaphor for it would be like if you had a beautiful mansion and you were lucky enough to have this incredible young staff and everything always looks perfect because it breaks down, they fix it. You don't even notice it. Boom, 7 billion cells die, 7 billion liver cells are put right back in place. That's your body. That's the sirtuins. But as they get older, your staff gets a little senile, forgets things, and now you don't give them the resources, and all of a sudden your mansion turns to a collapse. That's aging. So how do we prevent that? Literally, the science today is showing how they're able to not only slow it, but in some cases start to reverse it. So those NAD that have dropped off can be brought back, and the way they can be brought back is there's something that helps create it, a precursor. It's the last term I'll give you, NMN, like never, mother, never, okay? And that NMN is something your body naturally makes, but you can get in a supplemented form. That then lets the NAD fuel, so now your sirtuins do all this incredible work that keeps you young and strong. That's how he's 53, but really 33, because he has a series of ways he stimulates that. So the only problem is, I have a company that does this, and I'm now, David's a dear friend of mine, and so we tested 6 products on the market. Some were like $39 a month, some were $129 a month. Not a single one had any NMN in it. And it's advertised as NMN. And I said, Asked the lab guy, I said, are these people just lying and cheating? He goes, well, most of it comes from China, but he said, I don't think that's what they're doing usually. It just breaks down within about 30 to 45 days. And as a result of that, there's none in there. It's inert, right? So David has a way, he stabilized something. But here's the really cool thing that's coming. So you can get enema now that will start to change all this. If you're early 40s, you do this, you'll see a major change in your energy. It takes about 14 days.
Okay.
All right? I'll give you an example.
I'm 39. Can I start now?
Yes, you can start now.
Okay,
and most things you want to start before you need them.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you want to optimize. Instead of waiting until there's a problem, let me optimize so I don't have a problem. That's the philosophy of this book. That's the philosophy of regenerative medicine. So here's an interesting example. If you take an old mouse, which is a 70-year-old person in a mouse form, would be 20 months, 24 months old, and you have them get on a treadmill, they can only go about a quarter of a mile before they're exhausted. If you take a young, powerful mouse, they can do 4 times that. They can run a full kilometer. When they give NMN for 14 days to a mouse, just normal NMN, that mouse, that old mouse, will run 2 to 3 kilometers. In other words, 200 to 300% more than the strongest mouse around.
Wow.
So then my question was, well, that's cool, but will it work with humans, right? Because not all my studies work. Some do, some don't. So Dr. Sinclair clued me in, and I got to meet his partner in another business, and it's called Metro Biotech. It's based out of Boston, and they're doing something pretty amazing. No one knew about this till about 2 weeks ago. I knew about it because I invested in the company. But for 2 years, they've been working with the United States Army and working with our special forces. So they first spent 2 years, first showed it's safe, then showed its effectiveness. A commander got very excited about what he saw because the study just finished, and he blabbed to somebody who was obviously a reporter. And so it was in the Daily Mail about a week ago, and it was in a Boston paper about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I can't tell you what the results are because they're still top secret, but I can tell you what he reported. And here's what he said. He said, those studies on mice, the strongest men and women in the world, because there's not a lot of improvement for someone who's in the special forces, right? He said their endurance exploded. These are the most strong people you know. He said their muscular strength shot through the roof from the same stimulus. Now, there wasn't any extra exercise. And the most powerful thing was their cognition went through the roof. And that's what they want, because you're a soldier and exhausted. You got to be able to think through this. That's what your mind is what saves you, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're on a phase 3 trial right now for COVID, because COVID steals from your mitochondria. That's why people have so much fatigue, both to prevent it and for long-term COVID. It's in phase 3, and it's in its final steps. There's one for kidneys because COVID affects that. And then they're starting one right now for people just beginning Alzheimer's, because the brain uses more energy than any other part of your body.
Right.
So imagine, by the way, this is not going to be a nutraceutical. This will be FDA approved. You go to your doctor, and your doctor can give you this. It's a natural substance, but the difference is this one doesn't break down. It's crystallized. And so the absorption, instead of 30%, is 300%.
Wow.
So that's why they're seeing these main results. So that's 24 months away, roughly. Could be 18. So I tell people what they can do right now with NMN that you could start doing, and then show you what you can be able to do then. To me, that's one of the most exciting things in the world. Because imagine having something that gets your genes to turn on and off the right genes at the right time, so you're not prematurely aging and everything, you're going to stay younger. You're reducing inflammation, which is the basis of disease. You got more energy in every cell of your body, and your DNA is being connected and cleaned up. Yeah. So while you do want to work on your mind, there are things that you can do that are effortless. I mean, you're popping a simple pill that's natural in your body that puts your body back in balance.
Wow.
I mean, this is the world we're entering.
Well, oh my God, so many questions. My brain's going to explode. So for people who are listening to this, right? So maybe they're like, their brain is also exploding, but they're at a more basic level, right?
Yes.
The soccer mom in Ohio listening to this podcast. There's so many tools that you have far beyond what's in here that can just help her in her life right now, that are about, like you mentioned earlier, the 3 questions that you're going to ask yourself. Yes. Can you talk
I'd be happy
listeners through that?
So years ago, when I was growing up, I grew up pretty poor and a rough life. My mom is the most important person in my life. She's now passed, but she had a rough time when she used alcohol and prescription drugs. And so I became more of a social psychologist because I had to be able to manage her states. Yeah. And I'm grateful. If my mom had been how I thought she should have been, I wouldn't be the man I am. So I'm beyond grateful to her. But as a result of that kind of tough breakdown or growing up, I had to try and figure out answers. And I had 4 different fathers. And we had times when there was no food. The reason I provide 100 million meals a year is not because I'm such a nice guy. It's like my family suffered, I suffered, I don't want anybody else to suffer. So It's a passion for me. But my life has changed because there's a knock at the door. I go to the door, this big guy's there. My parents are shouting back and forth, saying things you can't take back. And the guy goes, he's holding giant groceries in each hand, like bag. And he had an empty pan with a frozen turkey, uncooked turkey on the ground. He'd sat down beside him. And he says, your father here. And I was like, we're not going to die. We'd had saltine crackers and stuff, but we weren't going to have a Thanksgiving dinner, right? And I was like, just one moment, man. I go to my daddy. He and my mom are screaming at each other. I got my younger brother, younger sister trying to get them not to hear it. I said, Dad, the door. There's a guy at the door for you. He goes, you answer. I said, I did. He won't talk to me. He's here for you. And I was the most excited I can remember being in years in that moment because I just knew this is going to change Thanksgiving. We're going to be so happy. My dad opens the door, looks at this man, and got angry. And he goes, we don't accept charity. And he went to just close the door in the man's face. And the man's foot was down here. And so it bounced off his foot and stayed open, which made my dad madder. And then the man said, sir, I'm just the delivery guy. Somebody knows you're having a tough time. Everybody has a tough time. They want you to have a beautiful Thanksgiving. My dad said, we don't take charity. He started to close the door again, hits the foot again. My dad's getting madder. And then this man said this, I'll never forget. He saw me, I'm sure I looked crestfallen. And he said, sir, please don't let your ego get in the way of taking care of your family. I thought my dad was going to kill him. Veins in the side of his face were exploding. And there was this long moment, like waiting for the bomb to ignite. And he just took the food and closed the door and never said thank you. I was shocked. I was stunned. And I was sad. I was so excited. Number one, there was food. Number two, we're going to have this family thing. And my father left our family shortly thereafter. And I carry his name. I had 4 fathers. He's the one that touched me the most. And so I was devastated. But about a year later, just as a kid, I started thinking this through. How come I was so excited and how come he was so upset? And I began to piece together, and now I've used this the rest of my life. So there's 3 decisions we make every moment we're alive. My dad made them that day, so did I, but we made them differently. And the problem with these 3 decisions for most people is they're made out of habit. If you listen to social psychologists, about 48% of what we do is habit. What's great about habit? You don't have to think.
Yeah.
What's bad about habit? You do the same thing.
Right.
If it doesn't work, keep doing the same thing. So if you make these 3 decisions consciously, you can change your whole life. And they're really simple. The first decision you make is, what are you going to focus on? So what did my dad focus on? He had not provided enough food for his family. How do I know that? He muttered it, talked about it continuously. He was really angry. What did I focus on? Easy for me. I was just a kid, right? Food. This is amazing. We're going to have this great Thanksgiving, right? So right away, whatever you focus on controls what you feel. So if you're thinking, oh my God, my kid's going to get killed, or where are they, or they're dying, we've all done that. And then you're sick in your tummy and then they're fine, right? And you had all these adrenaline going through you and so forth, right? So focus equals feeling, but there are habits of focus. So if I asked your audience, if I asked you, what do you think most people focus on more? What they have or what's missing?
What's missing?
100%.
Yeah.
And even overachievers focus on what's missing, Rachel.
Yeah.
Because that's why they're on the hamster wheel. No matter how successful they are, they're never fully happy.
Right. How
can you ever stay happy if you're constantly focusing on what's missing? You can't. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what good person you are. It's like, think of it as software. That software will not make you happy.
Yeah.
It'll make you worry. It'll make you feel less than. It'll make you think you're not enough. It'll make you and it's just a habit of thought. How about this one? Which one do you think people do more of? Focus on what they can or can't control?
Can't.
Without a doubt. And by the way, in COVID, that's been magnified because there are lots of things we can't control. We can influence them, but we can't control them. But there are lots of things we can control.
Yeah.
Our weight, the most important things we can control, but no one talks about it, right? So when you're constantly focused on what you can't control and what's missing, you tell me what kind of emotions will that person have, no matter how smart they are, no matter how good-hearted they are, no matter what a good Christian or religious person they are, or whatever kind of religion they have, what are they going to feel?
Suffering. But
Total suffering.
I would say, speaking of my audience, biggest issue she faces is anxiety.
No question.
Everything that you just said is what's adding to that, right?
Well, then let me add a third piece to the cake, okay? Which do you think people focus on more, the past, the present, or the future? Now, we do all 3, but where do you think most people spend their time?
The past.
The past is, for people that are unhappy, it is the past.
Yeah.
For people that are stressed, it's the future.
Future, 100%.
Right? Most achievers focus on the future. It's actually great to anticipate the future. But when you're missing what's here, and then what makes it worse is when you get in a fear state, or you're thinking about what's missing and what you can't control, then what part of the future do you create? You make up a future that's not a compelling one that creates more anxiety.
Well, and your subconscious also doesn't know the difference between the things you're imagining, which is what's giving you the anxiety.
You got it. So you have it directly in your head. So now you're living it. You're living that experience. So with my father, just go back to that for a second. He focused on, he had not taken care of his family. And that was the first decision. That alone would put you in a horrible place. Second decision is, what does this mean? So the minute you focus on something, whether you know it or not consciously, you can do it consciously, but most people don't. You go, what does this mean? Is this person attacking me? Are they dissing me? Are they challenging me? Are they coaching me? Are they loving me? Whichever answer you come up with will instantly change your biochemistry. It'll change what you feel and change the third decision, what you decide to do. Because if you're pissed, you're going to behave differently than if you're feeling grateful. If something happens, is God, and it's not what you want, or it feels horrible, is God punishing me? That's what some people come up with. Is God challenging me? Is this problem a gift from God? Or is it nothing to do with God? I'm just a lazy little brat. And I haven't done my part, right? Whichever decision you make will completely change your biochemistry, change what you feel, and then we get habits of these meanings, right? So then you feel the same thing over and over again, and then you think it's you. Or this is my lot in life. No, it's just a pattern you've done. It's just a habit. You can change the habit. And so think about it. So my dad is like, okay, I didn't take care of my family. What does that mean? I'm worthless. And what did that make him feel? Pretty easy to tell. How do I know he's worthless? He muttered in his breath for weeks before he left. And what he decided to do, leave our family. I'm worthless. I don't belong here. It was devastating. But I look back on it and it was the greatest day of my life because that's why I feed 100 million people a year. Because would I have really cared if I hadn't lost that? Would I really care if I hadn't been through that pain? I'd love to believe I would, but I don't know if I would.
Yeah.
I care because I've experienced it. So for me, it's not intellectual what people are going through. So those three decisions, the third decision is what am I going to do? But just think, the meaning will equal the emotion, and the emotion is your life.
Right.
Because we have habits of emotion. I always call it your emotional home.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Right?
I'm not going to start quoting UPW to you because that would be
Go
weird.
for it.
But when you guys did the virtual one last November or something, because I was just like, I was talking to Dean. I'm like, I need something. And he was like, don't tell anybody, but we're going virtual. I was like, fuck yeah. So I spent a weekend by myself. So helpful. I had gone through a year-long divorce and I just needed that space.
Yes.
And it's funny, I'm going to sound like a stalker right now, but I think I've done UPW 4 times.
Wow.
And I've gotten,
awesome.
I have all of my workbooks and I have different notes.
Could you go
time.
at different stages?
Yeah.
You're dealing with something different. Yeah,
but
I get it totally.
Went, the last one I had gone to, and when you guys did it virtually for the first time, you said, what's your favorite flavor of suffering?
That's right.
And I was like, oh, fuck. Oh my God.
Meaning, where do you spend the most time? Right. Even though you know it's not good for you, you still go there. So that's a favorite flavor.
One of my favorite quotes from Wayne Dyer is, when you squeeze an orange, lemon juice never comes out. Yeah. When something's under pressure, whatever is inside of it will come out. So will you talk about emotional home? Yeah. Because I'm not sure if the audience is as.
And what I mean by emotional home, so that they know what we're talking about. First of all, thank you for sharing that with me. And maybe for me, so we can tell people about these digital programs, because I have more moms now attending my seminar every time in history. Because
childcare is such an issue and they can't afford to travel. It is a huge deal. So
trust me, just an aside for a second. Imagine, because I know this is your mission. You're not doing this because you have to. It might be your business, but it's really your life. Yeah. Same for me, right? I don't have to work another day in my life. Imagine your entire life you believe God's made you for this, and you've done pretty well in helping people, millions. And the major way you do it is by immersion. Because if you go learn a word at a time, ask people, how many learned a language in high school and college? How many still speak it? None of them, right? But if I dropped you in Italy for 6 weeks and didn't even give you a teacher, you're going to come back speaking Italian, right? 100%. In a very different way, it'll be in you. So that's what I do. So all of a sudden, we had the 60th birthday party and my wife was amazing. I said, I don't want a party. And she's like, I'm putting on a party. I said, well, party with a purpose. So we raised $14 million and I added $5 million. So $19 million to save kids for Underground Railroad, which is one of my dear passions. So it was the most amazing, beautiful night. We're all in tears. We're saving these children's lives. And it was gorgeous and like a peak experience in your life. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later or 10 days later, I'm supposed to do a seminar in San Jose. You went to a San Jose event, right?
Yeah.
So, stadium, it's up for 15,000 people. I think we had 12,500 people in a few more weeks. So we do our normal 15,000 people. Governor of California decides, based on COVID, is very early days, change the rules. 10 people's the max that could be around each other.
Yep.
10. So I was like, everybody's like, was calling me saying, first they called me and said, are you going to shut down the seminar? I said, I bled out with mercury poisoning and got on stage in a wheelchair. I'm not going to cancel something, but the governor canceled it, right?
Yeah.
So what do I do? I was like, and I want to tell people this because a way of thinking. So I was like, screw that. We're going to Vegas. They're never going to shut down Vegas. 2 weeks later, they shut down Vegas right after we moved the seminar there, right? And I was like, okay, here's what we'll do. We're going to go to like 1,500 movie theaters and put 10 people in each. And I did this years ago, but not 10 people. I did a smaller number. But that way we can get everybody there. They can do it locally. They can still be around other people. And it's huge screens. It'll still be the dynamic, of what I create.
Yeah.
It's like a rock concert, right? And so they shut down the movie theaters. So the last step was like, okay, I have a friend that has a church in Houston, 15,000 people. I'm renting this church. They're not going to keep Costco open and shut down the church.
Right.
They shut down the church and kept open Costco.
Right.
I'm like, so then I was with Dean. Thank God for Dean. Dean Graziosi was one of my partners and dear friends, mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
And Dean says, Tony, I said, I got to find a way to serve people. Maybe I'll do this free seminar or something. He goes, I really think you got to do like a webinar. And I went and watched somebody do a webinar with like 252-inch screens.
Right.
And I said, I'll chop off my hands first. I mean, like you've been in my event, it would be nothing like that. So we took out a tape recorder and I said, here's what we're going to do. And I said, we're going to get a building with 40-foot high ceilings and I'm going to build 20-foot high LED screens so I can see every pimple, every movement. I can see their children. If we're going to enter their home, I want to really enter their home. I want to be better than a live event. And I'm gonna do a 50 feet wide, 180 degrees around. I put the best sound system in there, so it's like being in a stadium. And I'm gonna go to Eric Yon at Zoom, and I'm gonna get him to allow so I can bring people up and see them. But I need to be able to bring not 1,000 people. That was the limit on Zoom. I said I need 25,000 people. Right. And then I'm gonna build an app, and we'll do it where people can shake the app instead of clapping. And if one does it, you'll barely hear it. But if 10,000 do it, the place will be shaking, right? I want to make it just as real as an event. So I brought 9 companies together and they're like, this is a huge project. I think we can do this in 9 months. I was like, no, 9 weeks is what you got. And we did it.
Yep.
And you went to one of them.
Yep.
But what's really cool, I've had a group of people follow me from Stanford and measuring my body over the years. It's pretty crazy what my body goes through in these events. But they started measuring the people in the audience. And since it was digital, I wanted to see how much of that would really transfer.
Yeah.
And, people from, first of all, 195 countries, but all of a sudden I got moms with their kids.
Yep.
And grandmas with their grandkids. Yeah. And I remember seeing this one Indian man, he was there with his turban on and his wife was there and he was really upset, you could see, because she'd commandeered clearly the big screen, right? But like 20 minutes later, he's kind of dancing and by the end of the program, he's fighting her for the piece of wood because he was this wood breaking piece. But they tested people around the world and saw the biochemical changes that I do in a seminar happen to them as well.
Oh, wow.
And 30 days later, they did measurements. This is during COVID. In their homes, the worst time, 70% reduction in negative emotions, 52% increase in positive emotions. And then they did it 11 months later, not 30 days later, 11 months in the middle of COVID. They didn't do 12 months because COVID was like starting to open up. Same results for people.
Wow.
That's the changing in conditioning. And they prove how what I do changes neurologically. What's your programming, the way you're wired. But come back to your question you were saying about is emotional home. Emotional home means, maybe a metaphor will help your listeners or viewers. Have you ever seen people on television, like let's say in New Orleans or Florida, wherever, and then, a storm comes or a cyclone and it destroys everything they have and they're picking up the piece of their life and they're with their children and your heart's breaking, and then 3 years later they rebuild when it happens again. And in some cases it happens again. And there's some point where you might, no matter how much compassion, you go, why don't you move?
Right.
Why don't you do something? They don't move is because what they know.
Yeah.
And we all have an emotional home, a place we go back to no matter what happens in our life. And some of those homes are not real happy. And, when your conditioning growing up was not so great, mine was part of that too, you tend to go to not great places. Right. It's like people picking the wrong partner, do all these things, is they're trying to get back to that feeling.
Right.
And so
is there safety for them in the certainty
there's
of that?
certainty.
Yeah.
It's not always safety, but there's certainty. And even when it's painful, there's comfort in what you know. Right. The unknown is what scares people the most, right? And so what happens is you got to rewire that. You don't have to change your home, but maybe it's time to make an addition. Maybe it's time to bring some new emotions in, because I'm sure you know somebody that's always worried.
Yeah.
And if they're not worried about themselves or their kids, they're worried about somebody else's kids or about the earth or something, right? I'm sure you know somebody's always angry.
Yes.
They're always pissed off. And if there's not some pissed off in their own life, they get pissed off at something that has nothing to do with them, right? And I bet you know somebody who's not funny, but thinks they are, and they crack themselves up. Well, you want to hang out with them because being around them makes you feel better. So once you know what your emotional home is, now the time to shift it is through these simple practices, asking these 3 decisions differently. Like, what am I going to focus on? What's wrong is always available.
Yeah.
So is what's right.
Yeah.
And you catch yourself. And after a while, your brain goes there. Now I have a process. All of your followers, if they want to, can go. There's no cost for it. They can go to tonyrobbins.com/priming. I think you know what priming is. Yep. It's a 10-minute process. Yep. I do it every morning. And it's how I've conditioned my mind. I didn't just show up this way.
Yeah.
And look, I got 105 companies. I got 1,000 employees. I got 5 kids, 5 grandkids. I'm trying to be a great husband and a great friend and a great brother and an athlete and serve the world. So I understand the challenges of multitasking. If you don't take control of your mind daily for just 10 minutes, you're going to have a rough ride.
Right.
But if you go through just 3 minutes of gratitude, like 3 things you're grateful for, and you don't remember it over there. Like, I remember going on a roller coaster. You remember the front of the roller coaster going over, like where you feel it.
Yeah.
It starts to reprogram, because the emotions that mess us up are fear and anger. And gratitude is the solution. You can't be grateful and angry simultaneously.
Yep.
You can't be grateful and fearful simultaneously.
Yeah.
So, and then the second part is a part for kind of a blessing, so to speak. People can use a prayer or whatever it is. And then the third part, 3 minutes, is thinking of 3 things you want to accomplish, but seeing and feeling them as done and feeling grateful for it, so that, as you said, the brain doesn't know the difference between something you actually experience and something that you're imagining. And what happens is, at the end of 10 minutes, you're ready for the world, and you see the world different. You react to things differently. And so that's just a simple daily practice. So in an event, we do it immersively, and we have people transform, and you can see it a year later what it's like. But also, you can do this for yourself just daily. And also, it's just feeding your mind.
Yeah.
It's like, I grew up around cassette tapes, and I used to drive down when I had no money and making $40 a week as a janitor, $35 a week as a janitor. And I would save it up and go buy these tape programs. You couldn't go on YouTube and get stuff for free like that. It was like $300 for 6 cassettes and a workbook. And I tell you that because I valued it. I listened to it again and again and again and again until it became part of me. And those investments I made were the best investments of my entire life, because it was so expensive for me at that time, and I couldn't waste it. And I'm here today. I'm a product of feeding that mind and heart and spirit.
Yeah.
Right?
One of my favorite quotes of yours is, where focus goes, energy flows.
Yes.
And I feel like in talking about feeling and what you choose to focus on, it's really powerful. I said it to myself 1,000 times when I went through divorce.
Yes.
Will you explain that concept?
Well, if you think about it, it kind of goes back to what I said. Whatever you focus on, you feel.
Yeah.
So if you think you're supposed to meet your husband, your wife, or boyfriend or girlfriend or someone at 7:00 for dinner, and you get there at 7 and they're not there, what do you feel? I asked this of an audience, 10,000 people. You get a lot of people saying pissed off, and you get a lot of people saying worried.
Yeah.
And then I go, well, what if it's 7:30 and they've not called, they've not shown up, and they've not texted? I'm really pissed off, really worried. What if it's 8:30 they've not called? Somebody will yell out, I'm full, I didn't wait for the bastard. Something like that, But ultimately what you get to see is it's the same, and then the person shows up. Now how do you treat them?
Right.
Because the person who's upset is saying they don't care, they're out screwing around with somebody else, they do this every time. So they're picturing this in their mind, saying these things, puts them in a certain state. Well, when they show up, you're going to treat them in a way that makes them never want to come around you again.
Yeah.
And then the person who's worried thinks, what if they're in a car accident? And so now they're all stressed out. When they finally arrive there, they're going to greet them very, very differently. So we have to train ourselves to focus on what we want instead of what we're afraid of. And that's just a matter of repetition. I did this with, this funny examples with, I had the privilege to be able to learn how to drive race cars. And I got to learn from a guy named Bob Bondurant, who owns a school, and he's a very famous race car driver. And I went to Northern California. There's a place called Laguna Seca that's famous because it has this corkscrew turn where you're going 110, 120 miles an hour straight at a wall, and you have to go around it with hyperspeed. And so he puts me in the car the first day, and he says, I want to show you what a car can do. And gets me all belted up. He belts up. At the end of that ride, doing all this stuff, at the end, my heart was beating out of my chest. And I'm usually more of an adventure guy, but this thing was not an adventure. It felt like death. And he looks at me at the end, he goes, in 4 days, you'll do that. I said, Bob, I'm real positive and you're crazy. I said, I don't even know if I want to do this. He goes, let me help you. And this is a good lesson in life. He said, we're never going to take you at that speed until we first put you in a spin car. I said, what's a spin car? He said, spin car is a special car we've designed. You're going to drive. I don't have any brakes or control. You still have to be in control. But I have these 4 buttons over here. And I can push one of the 4 buttons. As soon as I see you're not concentrating enough, I'll push one. And it lifts one of the four wheels up, and we will spin out of control in that direction. And there's walls all around the place. He goes, now, two things. All you got to remember is focus on where you want to go, not on what you're afraid of. I'm like, they teach this. This is easy. It wasn't, right? And he says, I get it. He goes, no. I want you to think about it. Have you ever heard about a guy driving his car down a country road, brand new Porsche going 110 miles an hour, and he hits the only telephone pole in a quarter of a mile? How? Because he goes, I don't want to turn into that. And whatever you focus on, you steer into.
Right.
So you got to focus where you want to go, even though it's scary. So I hear him, I understand, I'm going to go. And then, it's like a challenge for me. He's not going to find me not concentrating. You watch these guys driving cars, and it's really intense when you go for a long period of time, more concentration than most sports. I'm sweating, I'm going. And then he finds that moment, just like life. Life doesn't get you when you're prepared, right? Right. Your divorce happens when you're not prepared, right? That's how life works. I've been through it too. We've all been through it. So what happens? He pushes the button, we start spinning out of control. What does my brain immediately do? Look straight at the wall. By the way, he just got done telling me, if we hit that at full speed, we can die. He said, and so you got to make sure you brake. But secondly, he said, if we hit it and not at full speed and you damage the car, you're paying for the car. So I was like, at all those stuff, I looked straight at the wall after all that conditioning, after all that training, I should say. But he saved my life. He pushes my face physically this direction where we got to turn left. Now I'm fighting him because I want to see the death happen. But he keeps holding my face. And now what happens? I steer that direction. But here's the thing we all have to remember. When you start doing the right thing, you're not always instantly rewarded because there's a lag time from the momentum you had at the old way.
Right.
If you've overeaten for 30 years and then suddenly eat well for 2 days and you're pissed off you haven't lost enough weight, you're still in lag time. You got to keep doing the right thing and it'll catch. So sure enough, I'm fighting him like I'm literally still trying to look at it. He's holding my face. And the last few seconds, the wheels catch. And it's like, my mind is 6 inches and it was probably 5 feet, but it didn't matter. My heart's beating out of me, right? He looks at me and goes, did you learn? I said, I learned. I didn't learn squat. So we do it again. I look at the wall and grabs my head. But after 4 or 5 times, your nervous system starts to see, this is what I must do to have a great life, to survive. And so the minute it happens, I turn and I look. And sure enough, even though it hasn't caught, it catches. So here's the question for you and your audience. If you do the right thing, if you focus on what you want versus not what you're afraid of, are you guaranteed to succeed?
No.
But if you look at the wall, you're guaranteed to hit it.
Probably.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee in life, but when you do the right thing and you direct on what you want versus what you don't want, more times than not, you're going to succeed. And that's what we have to train ourselves to do. So that's why I do it in seminars too, because it's one thing to talk about it verbally, as you know. It's another thing to change the way your body is using energy while you're doing it for 8, 10, 12 hours a day when you think you wouldn't be able to do 2 hours because you never have before.
Yes.
But when you hate what's going on, a minute feels like eternity. But when you're having the time of your life, 12 hours go by like that. And then 3 or 4 days. And what I didn't believe, and I got to see it myself, I didn't believe we could duplicate what we do in a live event. And I'm doing it again. I'm doing live events. I had 10,000 people here in Palm Beach, but there's very few people you can do, places you can do that.
Right.
I'm doing an event for 25,000 people. And they're in 195 countries.
So rad.
And you see families together and children. And it's literally like we start here at 10 a.m. For my Australian friends, it's midnight. They go from midnight to 1 in the afternoon. We're in every single time zone around the world. And then you build this community of people who are as driven and hungry as you are.
Yeah.
It's just gorgeous. And we figured out how to use COVID, not like COVID use us.
Right. It's happening for you, right?
Yes,
not
instead of
to you.
Good.
Right. And I do want to say, I think it's an incredible opportunity for people who are at home to be able to go to a virtual conference. But
it also saves them a ton of money. They don't have to fly. They don't have to pay for a hotel. They don't have to do all those, and they're not away from their family.
But I will say for women and moms, it's worth finding a way to do it in person.
I love that too,
because the beauty, obviously, is that you can access it. But I do think, especially in my community, sorry, Mike guy, especially in my community, oftentimes they're trying to go through a transformative event in the house with the person who is the reason that they're not able to transform.
I understand.
And I've seen that in my own community where they'll go through a day and then their partner is giving them so much shit or making fun of them and they're not really able to, because
you know
it
what a lot
is
of people are doing
life-changing.
though? I've seen a lot of women do it. They go and they do it with a group of girlfriends at their house together.
Nice.
So it's in a supportive environment.
Nice.
Some people do it at their office together with other people of that nature. So there's lots of choices. But I still love doing it in person.
It's
That's my preference.
so special.
It's just like I was supposed to do one in London coming up and, they shut everything down for Omicron and they're opening it back up again. And so I don't want anybody to be disappointed. And as you've done more than one, so you can do it one time like there and then go live. And it's like,
Right.
that's what people did last year because we only did one live event in October here in Palm Beach.
Yeah.
People flew in from all over the world for it, right?
Yeah.
Because they'd had other experiences and they wanted to go deeper.
Yeah, it's so cool. I think the life-changing thing that I took away the first time I got to sit at one of your conferences was an awareness that I was in control of my own life.
Yeah.
Which
is what you teach.
Right.
I loved in your book from the very beginning. It's like, I'm not going to support you in your misery. You know, it's like, these are lies. You are more than you think you are.
Right.
You can make these things happen, but you got to take 100% responsibility to make that happen. I love that about you.
Well, what's incredible about this book, what's incredible about money, like you keep trying to give this to people. And now it's an ownership of our health.
Yes.
On every level.
Yes.
It's pretty wild to think about the legacy that you have created and continue to create. And I'm curious what still drives that. Like, your life's incredible. You've already, I was explaining to my kids who I was coming to meet. I was like, he did this. Like, I'm doing this work because you came before me.
That's
and
beautiful.
You
That touches
continue,
my heart. Thank you.
you continue to pour your life force, pun intended, out to give people the ownership in all these different areas of their life. What's driving that still?
It's always been impact for me. I love people. Somebody asked my mom, was he always like this? She's passed away, but she used to tell the story, so I'd hear her version of the story. And, we grew up in kind of the hood of LA, a really rough territory, and on a commercial street in this crappy little house. There was a lot of violence around there. But right next door was this old liquor store. And we were poor, and she was pregnant with my brother. I was almost 4.5, I guess, years old, 5 years old. And, I would go to that place to get stuff because we had nobody else. My father was an underground parking attendant, so he wasn't there. So it was she and I. And so I guess she sent me next door to get bread and milk, which we desperately needed. We had very little money. I guess I was gone for a very long time, where she was worried, and I'd come back with no bread and milk. And she said, where's the bread and milk? And I said, well, there's a poor boy there, so I gave him our money. And she says, we're poor. So I've always had that. And I think there's an old movie called Mr. Holland's Opus. I use it sometimes to Date with Destiny. And there's a line in the movie with this man. His whole life was about, writing this great opus and how he'd make him rich and famous and all these things. And he becomes a school teacher, not because he likes kids, but because he gets off at 3 p.m. and has the summers off, thinks he's going to write this opus. And I could cry thinking about it right now because it's just what life's about. Life's about love, life's about people. But there's this moment when he loses his job because they cut the music program, and he decides he's going to retire. And he's leaving with his wife and his kid, who's deaf. He's ironically positioned. You know the movie.
I am very familiar.
I get teary-eyed thinking about it right now. Every time I watch it, you see this man come, and he's at the latter years of his life. And all of a sudden, as he's leaving, there's this sound in the gym, and he goes, what is that sound? He goes, no, and it's after hours. He goes to open up the gym, and there's all these students from all the years of his 25 years of teaching or 30 years of teaching, whatever it was, and they're all cheering, and he comes down, and he's just stunned by the response. And his wife gets up and says, a lot of people heard about the retirement of my husband, and I can't believe the outreach. And so we wanted to let him know how much he's loved. And then all of a sudden the doors open, and this little redhead girl who he had blasted in the beginning because she had no talent in the clarinet. Yeah. But he then fell in love with trying to support her. And it's when he became a better man. She's now an adult, and she's the governor of the state. And she goes bursting in and goes, oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were a little bit running late. And she comes up and she looks at him and gets on stage, and she does this little speech. But the essence of it is, Mr. Holland's touched all of us so much. She says, Mr. Holland had this opus he was going to write. And the word was it was going to make him rich and famous. But he's neither, at least not outside this small town. But she said, but if he just got those riches and fame, he would have missed out on what he has here. And she says, look around you, Mr. Holland. These are the notes of your music. This is the symphony of your life. And sorry, again, emotionally, I'm so silly. I'm an emotional guy. That's why I do what I do, because I get to see people's lives change. I get to see moms reclaim themselves. I see children, stand up for themselves. I see men who become men again. And really step up and take the responsibilities that make them feel alive. I see people build businesses, and I see people happy again. I see couples coming together. I see joy and happiness, not because life is always like that, but because they can find meaning even when it's painful. And to me, to live a life with that kind of meaning is a gift from God. And I think I was made to do this, and I've done my part, but I've also been graced. And that's why I'm so obsessed, this book, I want somebody not to have the fear of cancer I had. And now I can help them because there's a brand new blood test. 80% of the people who get stage 2, stage 3 cancer, as an example, and the Cancer Society says they're going to die. Now, 20% live. I focus on that. But they're right. When you get that long, it's really tough to turn around. But if you get at stage 1 or 2, it's 80 to 99% success. And a doctor, all these people in this book, these heroes, they tell their stories, they'll make you cry, they'll make you laugh. The doctor who created that lost his wife. Almost everyone here who created these breakthroughs that are life-changing, that sound unbelievable, they did it because it wasn't about them. They lost someone they loved, they lost their wife, they lost their husband, or one of their children, or something of that nature. And I guess I identify with them, is they just found a way to go beyond what people thought was possible. So now you can do this test. It's a simple blood test. It tells you whether you have 50 cancers or not. We had a man come in, his wife pushed him. He's like, I already did a physical. They did my blood and urinalysis. We did this test. It's called a Grail test, designed by this man who lost his wife because they discovered too late. And we find out he has kidney cancer, but it's just the beginning. It's a 20-minute outpatient procedure. He's perfectly fine. He's a father. He's a husband. His wife is so relieved. And it was that easy because the tools are here now. There's a test called a CCTA test. I'll finish with this. I know we got to go. But when I have this group called Fountain Life, a group of doctors, and I have a partner named Dr. Bill Kapp. Beautiful man. He built 12 hospitals, ran them, and then after 20 years said, I am so sick of reaction care. I'm so sick of disease care. I want to do precision. I want to do regeneration. I want to prevent. I want to show people it's possible. So we built these centers across the U.S., and we're doing one in Abu Dhabi. He calls me the other day. He's one of those super understated guys. He's one of those guys you got to lean forward and listen to. He doesn't talk loud like me. He doesn't overstate it. And he's just like, boom. He goes, Tony, I'm calling because there's been a breakthrough in cardiology that I think sincerely is one of the greatest breakthroughs in the last decade. And he said, you got to take advantage of it. And we're the first ones exposed to it. I want you to come check it out. So what is it? He said, well, the number one killer of men and women is heart disease, heart attack. And he said, the only way we see what's going on usually is someone does a CT scan, and that's usually when there's a real problem. And they're hard to read because what they're looking for is, have you built up, things in your veins that are going to knock you down. But what's interesting is the soft tissue is very different than when it calcifies. Mm. And the traditional scan can't tell you that. You might have a really high number, but it might all be calcified, which means it's healed, right? It's the stuff that's fleshy that can break off and make you a widowmaker by giving you a heart attack or a brain aneurysm. And so I said, well, this is fascinating. How does it work? He goes, it has an AI, and it literally opens digitally. This is the world we're in now. Opens your veins digitally, searches through, and finds out, is there soft plaque? That's what will kill you, or could kill you. Or is it hardened? And gives you a score, tells you where it is. They can predict a heart attack 5 years in advance, and they tell you what to do to avoid it. So this is what I live for. So I was like, okay, I'm coming. But my father-in-law is with us, and he's just turning 80. Beautiful man I love dearly, he's my own father. And he built a business from nothing. He's a self-made man in the lumber business. But, when you get to 80, people around you in our culture are like, oh, you got to prepare, right. Life's ending. And I watched the last few years, that energy started to drop because everybody around him talks that way. Get your affairs in order.
Right.
And, he was worried. Well, might I have a heart attack because, his father did and so forth. And guess what? I said, Dad, why don't you come with me? We'll do this little test. It's brief. It's fantastic. We probably both have some soft plaques. But they'll tell us where it is, and they'll show us what to do to clear it up. He decides to come with me. We go there, Rachel. This is what I live for. We go there, and my father-in-law is completely clean. Everything is calcified. He has no problems in his heart at all. He's got a heart like a 25-year-old, right? I'm doing much better than I did 5 years ago. I'm doing great, but he's doing even better than I am. Literally nothing to worry about. I live for those moments where you see that light in his eyes, where it's like, oh my God, I have a life. And then, we have this technique that works with a lot of athletes and anybody. Whenever you injure yourself, soft tissue gets around, and then the fluid doesn't get in, oxygenation get in, and often nerves get trapped. So I had this trap thing in my ankle without wasting all the time telling a story. It's just so bad that for 16 years, if you even touch it there, it's like I was electrocuted. Don't touch me. I did a 15-minute procedure with this 2 years ago. You can kick me, you can do anything, I don't feel anything, it's perfect. They just open it up with this fluid, amnio fluid, same thing we're born in, and then the nerve packed back in place. So I said, what makes dad feel old? Afraid he's gonna have a heart attack, right? Or stroke, both those aren't gonna happen. And now, I'm in pain all the time and I can't walk. So I said, Dad, as long as you're here, you can do this little relief thing. Why don't you have him look at your hip? Into 30 minutes, they find 2 locations. They treat it literally right there. He walks out an hour later, perfectly smooth for the first time in a decade, right? So we get on this is all finished with. We get on the plane. He looks at me like this and he goes, Tone, he goes, those guys that talk about living to 110, 120, I don't know if I buy that. But my heart's perfect. I'm walking perfect. I could live another 20 years. I could live to 100. You've only been married to my daughter 22 years. That's like a whole new life. So I live for that. That's why I wrote this book. Besides feeding 20 million people and advancing the research, I want people to have answers for those they love. I get a call once every 10 to 2 weeks. And this divided country of ours, we're all divided by all kinds of things. But one thing I think we're unified by, none of us want to lose our family members or friends, and we're going to. But wouldn't it be nice to prevent it? Wouldn't it be nice to heal it? Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody you love about feel 10 years younger, or yourself? Wouldn't it be nice to have the energy for you along with your kids and everyone else? And so those answers are actually here right now. And I'm dedicated to getting it out. And I'm excited to hear the stories of what's going to happen. I've already had a few because before the book went out, we sent it to people. I've got an assistant whose father was going in for back surgery, and he read the pain chapter. He didn't go in. He's out of pain right now. I've put him up with a guy named Peter Gosku that has this technique that I've used for 25 years. It's like, that's what I live for. And that's what gives me energy. And that's what keeps me going. Yeah. Sorry about the tears.
No. I want to make sure and say, because we're talking about stories before we end this. 5 years ago, now I'm going to cry. It's cool.
Okay, well, that's fair.
5 years ago, I went to a UPW conference. And it utterly changed my life. And the work that I've done, like I sat in that arena and asked bigger questions. And for most of my adult life, I thought something was wrong with me because I thought I'm a mom and I'm a wife and I'm not supposed to have ambition and I'm not supposed to dream of something bigger. And it was the first time in my life that I thought maybe God made me this way on purpose. And so I was like, well, if God made me this way, what would I do differently? And Girl Wash Your Face is a result of sitting in that conference. Wow. Throwing my first conference is a result of sitting in that conference. And I know you won't always get to meet the effect of your work, but you affected me. And then I affected other women. And you're never going to see the full results of what you've done. And it's not that thing where it's like, oh, you changed my life because I worked my ass off. I changed my life. I understand that. I
agree.
But if I hadn't had that catalyst, if I hadn't sat in that or jumped in that arena with you and peed my pants over and over because I pushed babies out of this body, like if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Well, you're giving me more credit than I deserve.
No,
but I love that I've been able to be a part of your journey and been a helpful part of your journey. And I love even more that you've taken the things you've figured out for you and passed them on, because that's why we're all here. Yeah. In the end, life is about meaning. Yeah. And the most meaningful thing is to grow and to give. Yeah. And you've done both those. So thank you for that.
This is a literal dream come true.
Thank you. Well, no one else got me to cry. I don't know how you pulled that off, kid, but you did.
I'm trying to be the next Oprah, man. I got to figure it out somehow.
That's beautiful. You want that?
Thank you. Not for whatever, but I will say, when you have to give your personality a name. Yeah. So the name that I chose at that UPW was Mogul.
Oh, wow,
and it was the first tattoo that I ever got.
Oh, that is so cool.
And it's still there. So that's
Mary has is your aunt? Cousin, who went to UPW just recently, and she unfortunately lost her husband. He committed suicide. I said, please bring him. And of course, I knew she was there, and I'm working on people. I hear what's going on with people, and I do things. We worked on her. but she's so transformed and so beautiful. But the funny part was, she said, she came to the house and I took a picture with her and she goes, can I have an autograph? And Mary's so protective of me, even though it's her family. I was like, honey, you don't have to protect me. I want to visit with her. And she goes, would you sign a piece of paper for me? I said, sure. And what do you want that for? It was that big. She's tattooing my signature on her arm. 2 weeks before, never heard of me. I was like, want a tattoo? I was like, I don't know. Maybe you should think of something else you want to tattoo besides my signature. In the end, what happened? The guy couldn't duplicate my signature. So what did he do? He put live with passion.
Okay.
Live with passion.
It's got like a trademark symbol. That's really cool.
That's cool. That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I am so grateful to finally get to know who you are. This lady I have to thank because she was the bridge for us.
Yeah.
Because she was such a fan of yours. And then she showed me your book and I was like, wow, I love the way you attack this with these lies, these false beliefs that limit us. And I loved how you called women to be more and not to just accept, because as you know, in the feminine world, very often, they're so supportive of each other that you don't grow.
Right.
And it's hard, and no man can say that shit to them, right?
Right.
But you could.
Yeah.
And you've lived it.
Yeah.
And it's there.
And I say this too, and it's not a dig in any way, but I was sitting at that conference and I was so inspired and I was so like pumped, and I just kept thinking, why are there no women on this stage?
Yes.
And I
and
thought
there are now,
that,
by the way,
I thought that for 3 days, and then I just heard this, like, it was the strongest moment I've ever had. Maybe I'm supposed to be on the stage.
I like that. That's
Swear to
so
God.
Cool.
And I planned my first conference, and I went $40,000 into debt because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and 100 people came.
Oh my God.
And then
I had 7 for my first one, thinking there's 500, so I understand.
Slowly kept building and growing, and it's been.
Well, I'm glad you persisted, and I know we all go through different seasons.
Yeah.
And I know you've been through a winter recently.
Hell yeah.
And I'm sure you've got some winter feelings still, especially with all that's going on in the world on top of it, honey. But who you are is more than anything that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And what you've already given would be a life well lived. But you're very young and there's so much more to give. And going through those winters is where most of my greatest strengths and most of my greatest insights have come from. Because if I could solve it for me, I could solve it for both of us, for hundreds of thousands or millions of other people.
Right.
So when you're in the middle of that, I don't know if it's helpful or not. For me, what's really helpful is I'm not the only one going through this shit. Whatever it is, financial, business, relationship, kids. And it's like, okay, if I can figure this out, then I can help so many other people. And it gives me a different incentive than just me. And then I don't feel bad about having the problem or the challenge. And so I hope that's a seed I can plant in you. Because, and what also follows winter, as you well know, thank God, is spring, right?
I think what I'm trying to grapple with now is there was sort of this meteoric rise after a lifetime of working at something, you know? And with that rise, it felt like then sort of a target. Because I don't think people are used to seeing a woman on stage with energy and sort of challenging you. And there's a part of me, sorry, this became a small therapy session, but there's a part of me that is sort of like, why the fuck am I putting myself through this? Like, why, I could write books, I could I don't have to be so forward facing.
Yes.
But
there's a part of your personality that demands that.
Right.
Because you respond to challenge, you grow. You're very unique and structured that way. And God made you that way, so you should take advantage of it as much as you can. Right. And you can give yourself balance too. Because we live in a crazy world right now where everybody monitors every word you say and they misinterpret it and they go crazy with it. This is not forever. This is part of the winter. Yeah. Right? But it'll change and people are going to get sick of it. Just like they're sick of COVID, they're going to get sick of all this backbiting bullshit. Right. And it'll turn. Yeah. And you do well during this time and continue to grow. And you'll be set for the rest of your life because spring will come and spring is a different attitude. It's like winter doesn't mean there aren't good days. It just means it's mostly cloudy and more than not, right? Yeah. And then springtime comes and it's mostly sunny and easy. And so, and how old are you now, may I ask?
39.
So honey, first of all, you're coming near 40 alone. I used to remember everybody telling me, oh, you turned 40, all these, they're all so full of shit. And then I got 40 and I was totally depressed and I never feel depressed. Because I just got a divorce, right? Which I initiated, but I got a divorce and my kids weren't with me. And I was like, is blood thicker than water? Because, 3 of my kids are adopted. And I was the worst day, 40. And I look back on it and then 50 was better, but I was still like, even at 40, it's like, have I done enough? I don't help millions of people. You've done this too. And then, 60, I'm telling you so you don't have to wait that long. Sunday, finally around 60, my brain was like, shit, I've done more than that. I'm still going to do 10 times more. Right. But it was no more like, have I done enough? Have I created enough? Have I given enough? Have I done those enough? There's no more questioning of that process. So it's a natural process to go through a stage of life where you're certain and crushing it. And then there's a period of questioning.
Right.
The questioning could be the environment that triggers the questioning. It could be a relationship triggers the questioning. It could be things going on with your kids. But that period of questioning, I'm making up, let's say 7 years of target going for it. And then you've got this 6 months or a year and a half of questioning. And then one of two things happens. You either go, this is the greatest shit in the world that I'm doing, and you recommit to it. Or you pick another direction and go there.
Right.
And then you'll go for, I'm making up the years, 7 years, and you'll question again. Having lived a few more decades, I'm just telling you, this is a natural process. And it's actually healthy. Because once you recommit, once you've said no, like what you just said there, if you decide, I don't need to do this, then don't do it. Do something else and enjoy yourself. Or I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it these ways selectively, so I have more time to do this that I enjoy, but I'm still going to keep growing in this area.
Yeah.
But whatever you do, will you either commit to what you've already done or you commit to something new? It'll reinvigorate you again for another period of time, and then you'll question again.
Did you always have a thick skin about?
No.
No.
I still don't have that thick skin. Just see me just crying here. What the hell are you thinking, right?
Well,
I look like I got a thick skin.
I feel like getting so much shit in personal development. There's so much that's not based on any actual fact.
Yeah.
But there's so much shit, and I don't want to make this the narrative, but I feel like it's harder to be a woman and doing it because it's like all of these things that you should be home with your kids. You should be
all the beliefs of other people. As long as we allow, and it still happens much rarely now at 60. I wish I could say it was true at 40. It wasn't. So I'm telling you this truthfully. I don't want to shoot you straight. Now at this stage, it's a different game because there's such an accumulated impact in people and knowing who the hell I am.
Yeah.
But at 39 or 40 years old, I'd question it. I'd feel bad about it. Trying to please everybody and all that shit. And I was a pleaser. That's why I was in a relationship where I was really unhappy. I stayed in a relationship. It was totally wrong for me because I was such a pleaser. I didn't want to make her unhappy. And it was like I was making, I was so happy in my work and with my kids that it didn't matter I wasn't happy here.
Right.
But when I turned 40 is when I finally said, no, enough of this. I don't want to live another decade this way.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of saying, no, I'm not going to live for what other people think or feel. It doesn't mean I don't care, but I'm just not going to let that be the priority. And rarely in my life has that shown up. For moments it's shown up since that time. But before that's there. So you're actually on the cusp of freedom. You're on the cusp of a point where your brain will say, no fucking more.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to fucking let these people do this. And then there'll still be moments, but it won't be the dominant force in your life.
Right.
And so pick your direction and go and refine it. And I think you're going to surprise yourself.
Yeah.
I promise you, we'll bump into each other at some point in the next 24, 36 months. And you're going to tell me how great you've broken through in different areas. Not phony, not fake, just like, I have these challenges, problems, and we can have this conversation. But you know what? I really figured this out. I figured that out. I feel like a different woman. I feel like it sounds so corny, but it's nice to have mentors that are older, but it's really hard to find mentors that are going through what you're going through. Even for me as a man, it was so hard. But if you can find a few people that lived 18 or 20 years more than you, not 5 or 3, there's a different perspective. So I had a gentleman in my life, Peter Gruber, who's 18 years my senior. And by the time I didn't really get to know him until I was 40. But as I did, I remember in the beginning, he would tell me, this is what you're going to probably go through at this stage. And I remember in the beginning, I loved him, respected him. I thought, well, everybody goes through different things. There's certain things everybody goes through. But by going through to them, you get to the other side. And what's on the other side is you owning yourself.
Yeah.
And you own yourself to a great extent. But I promise you, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, let's say, by the time you're 42, 3, 4, something of that nature, you are going to be a different person. You're the same soul, but your fucking ownership and what can move you and whether or not your ex can affect, none of that shit's going to affect you anymore. And your kids, you're going to say, things aren't ideal, but you're going to see the trajectory of who they're becoming, and you won't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
That's all coming quicker than you know. And you don't have to even do anything. It'll happen because you're on a trajectory of growth.
Yeah.
Right? It'll show up. God will guide you.
All right. Let's fucking go. Let's do it.